Good afternoon, the gathering at Scott Memorial. This is Pastor Stephanie. I'm trying it a little bit closer today. Bobby, who is my social media expert, told me I need to be closer. So it feels way too close, but bear with me. By way of announcements, we had a couple of announcements for today. We are starting Financial Peace University, which is Dave Ramsey's study that has helped so many people get out of debt. So perhaps you are concerned. January is now here and you're concerned about all the spending that you might have done or just the debt you have in general. And so this is a wonderful way. So starting January 26th from 9 to 10, right before our service, we will be offering financial peace, I believe in the gathering space. Don't hold me to that. We're still finding a spot, but I think that was the plan. And there's also childcare available. We have wonderful Sunday school classes for your children and a nursery for your infants as well. So little excuses, that's what we're going for, so that you can come and be part of such a wonderful experience. Also, Courageous Women, Lori Perone did a wonderful announcement today. One of our wonderful small groups is looking for new people. All of our small groups are always looking for new people, but this one is a group of women who've been studying the bad girls of the Bible, and now they're going to be studying the really bad girls of the Bible. So they are always looking for more people. They have been together since April. I was blessed to be with them for their retreat in October, and it was amazing to see how in just 6 months they have established amazing and beautiful relationships with one another. So these small groups are where we go deeper in our relationship with God, and they're just wonderful. So I hope that you will pray about becoming part of a small group. I am part of Sacred Marriage small group and have loved getting to know those women. So far it's all women better, and so I'm praying for that for you all too. And then I had sent an email to the congregation on Friday, I believe it was. The United Methodist Church made the news for about a potential split. Just to let you know, nothing is decided. All of these are proposals that will be voted on at General Conference, which is May 5th, through May 15th. So please join me in being in intense prayer for the delegates and for the time at General Conference, and that just God will take over. It is all in God's hands. So as I learn more information, I will pass that along to you. Hopefully soon we'll learn more about this proposal, and there will likely be many proposals that General Conference will be looking at and deciding which ones to vote on. So just be in prayer, lots of prayer. All right, so today we are looking at Epiphany, the wonderful story of the wise men in the Bible. So this comes from Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. Hear again these words. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, 'And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler, who is to shepherd my people Israel.' Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, 'Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, so that I may also go and pay him homage.' When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them with the star that they had seen in its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. Upon entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then opening their treasure chest, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another way." So we don't know much about these wise men. Some translations call them magi. We know that they're from the east, and we know that they journeyed to come see this child. Many believe that they might have been priests or potentially astrologers, people who studied the stars because they were aware of the sign, the star that appeared the night that Jesus was born. So that could be. We don't know where east means. Some scholars believe east could be actually an enemy of the Roman Empire, not yet conquered. Some traditions even say all the way from Korea. So we're not exactly sure. Well, we can infer some things about these magi, these wise men. Likely they had means and they had money, right? So potentially Jesus was almost 2 years old at this time. And so they could have been traveling for almost 2 years to get there. Also, they had the means and the time and the opportunity to go travel, whether it was 2 years, whether it was a couple months, whatever it was. It did not involve a car or an airplane, but it involved a lot of time and a lot of travel and a lot of preparation as well. So we can infer that they had some means, had some wealth. And so they had noticed this star that had appeared in the sky and had followed kind of their understanding of what these stars meant to know that a king had been born. In fact, they come knowing and asking, where is this king of the Jews? We saw his star at the rising. So perhaps they had known that an important birth was going to happen. And somehow they had discerned that it was maybe because of the region that there were Hebrew Jewish people living there, that this would be the king of the Jews. So we see that they have traveled all this way, and they make it very clear what they have come to do. They have come to pay this child homage. And so they first go to the seat of power, which would be Jerusalem. That is where King Herod is. That's where the temple is. That's kind of the center of power. So they go to the center of power to inquire where this child is. Now remember, they are not Jewish. They are Gentile, and they have just seen the star and want to come pay him homage. So homage is an interesting word. It means to worship, and it actually means to kind of prostrate yourself, so to lie flat in the midst of your God. But it also expresses submission, and submission to political powers and emperors. So King Herod, in those times, kings were seen as deities. They were seen as gods. And so King Herod is used to people coming to pay him homage. That is to be expected. In fact, that often led to issues because the Jewish people would not pay him homage because God said, worship me and me alone. And so worshiping the emperor meant you are not worshiping God and God alone. So again, King Herod is very used to people, especially magi, wise men, whoever they were, coming to pay him homage. But that's not what these men came to do. In fact, Herod learns that they're even there by other groups. In fact, we're told Jerusalem is terrified when they hear that these wise men, these magi, have come to pay another king homage. They know that Herod is not a nice person. Yes, he's created by God and has some good in him, but he does some really evil things. As we looked at last week, he had all the infants in and around Bethlehem killed because he was so threatened by this king who may be in his kingdom. So he was not known for being gentle or being nice in any way, shape, or form. So I'm sure that all of these people in Jerusalem who had heard that these wise men have come searching for this baby were terrified, wondering what is Herod going to do to retaliate, perhaps against these wise men, but definitely against this king who may or may not be here in this area. Also, we see that God is protecting these wise men, as we see in the story. They are warned in a dream. Herod says, hey, let me know where you find this child because I want to go pay him homage. Knowing, of course, we know that that's not what he really wants to do, but he's trying to trick the wise men. And the wise men are told in a dream to go home another way. We're not told anything else about it, so we assume that God protected them on their journey home. Again, Herod is a man with a lot of means and opportunity and power, so he easily could have had these men tracked down and killed for disobeying his request. So again, King Herod, not the nicest person, and we give thanks that this is a different time. So we have these wise men who go to Jerusalem. Now again, they don't know the scriptures. They've seen the star and it's rising, but they don't know the scriptures. So they inquire to the chief priests and scribes, tell us, don't you have prophecies? Where is this child to be born? So they look in the prophecies and they tell the Magi about Micah chapter 5, verse 2. But you, O Bethlehem of Ephrathah, who are one of the little clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to rule in Israel, whose origin is from of old, from ancient days. So they're aware that this child will be born in Bethlehem, this Messiah, this one who has been promised. That's where he is to be born. So the Magi receive this news, and then they go to follow this star. What's fascinating too, when we think about the fact that these chief priests and these scribes, they didn't follow these Magi. I kind of assumed that they were kind of put off by these Magi even requesting this information. I'm sure they assumed that if God was going to have the Messiah be born, God would first come visit them, the chief priests and the scribe. They're at the temple, right? The temple is in Jerusalem. That's the seat of the Jewish faith. And yet God didn't first go to the temple to tell the chief priests and scribes that his son, the Messiah, has been born. Instead, he goes to shepherds tending their flocks, and then to Magi, these Gentiles who don't even believe in God. He sends them to go see this child. So it really is powerful when we think about what God is doing here. So we're told in Scripture that when they had followed the star at its rising to over the place where the child was, and when they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. So again, this isn't even their Messiah. Their faith is different, yet they are overwhelmed with joy when they're in the presence and have found this child, the King of the Jews, who they were sent to seek, but also to pay homage, to worship. And so after they pay him homage, first they pay him homage, and then they give gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Again, not the typical gifts that we give babies and expectant parents, like diapers and formula and other things that seem practical. These wise men bring these gifts, gold and frankincense, which were used for kings, so to signify that he is a king. And then the myrrh was used for burial, to prepare a body for burial. And so God is already showing what is to come, that this son will be killed. And that is part of why he is sent into the world. So a powerful reminder of how awesome these gifts are as well. But so the Magi remind us of the need to pay homage, to worship. Here again, they come and they are worshiping the Messiah who is not even their Messiah. And they model for us what we are to do. We are to pay homage and to offer our gifts. And so I shared with the congregation today, I'm going to share with you a powerful story of a time that I saw people paying homage in such a powerful way. So for my 2 summers that I was in seminary, I went to Guatemala and worked with this organization that worked in the highlands of Guatemala, really impoverished areas. Many of these communities had been devastated by hurricanes 10 to 15 years before. And so they were rebuilt and they were lacking a lot of resources. But also the big thing that this organization that I worked with did is they built stoves for women inside their homes. Most of the communities did not have many men. The men had either been killed or were off other places working and hopefully sending money home. And so they would live in a one-room building with their family, a small building. And this building would have an open fire. They would use to cook. Being in the highlands, we were up in elevation, and so it was cold and wet most of the year. So the fire was not just for cooking, but also for warmth and to keep things dry. But the problem is when you have an open flame, you are constantly breathing in that smoke. And so there were a lot of respiratory issues. So these stoves that we would go in to build had a chimney. They were primitive stoves. I would not know how to use them, a flat top. It still used kind of an open flame, but it was now enclosed, and then a chimney, which was key for getting the smoke out. So for 2 summers, I translated for teams that came in from the United States to help build these stoves and to get to know these villagers and to just be in community. The wonderful thing about my role is that I was around people all the time. And being an introvert, the really hard thing about that role was I was around people all the time. Most of the time I lived in Quetzaltenango, which is a smaller city in the highlands, and I lived at the office of the organization I was working with. Now, in the center of town, which was like 6-7 blocks away, there was a beautiful Catholic cathedral, gorgeous, that I would go to sometimes. But when I really needed time away with God, I had found an even closer Catholic church. So again, we're in the Highlands, and so it was about 8,000 elevation where I was living. I'm used to sea level, so 8,000 was definitely thinner air. And then this smaller Catholic church that was only 2.5 blocks or so from where I was living was literally up a hill, up a mountain, really. And so part of the reason I would go there was just to get exercise, and all I could do was concentrating on breathing and making up the hill. But then when I got to the top of the hill, there was this gorgeous Catholic church that was definitely a part of their community. It had these big doors that were open throughout the day, and you had like chickens coming in and out and kids running around and just people in there worshiping in their own ways. So I would go in there just to sit, just to talk to God, just to be around other people who were just worshiping God in powerful ways. And I'd see the priest talking to different congregants, and again, I was just there to be in the presence. But what was so powerful for me is I got to see people paying homage in wonderful ways. So the church had a kind of cobblestone floor and a beautiful altar at the front. And in the Catholic Church, it's only certain people who can approach the altar. And so there would always be these women, different women every time I went, who would start at the very back of the sanctuary at the doors, and they would be on their knees, sometimes even lying flat, prostrate on the ground, crying out to God. Now, these were not young women. These were women likely in their 70s and 80s. You could tell just from how weathered their skin was. They would be in these beautiful dresses, yet they would be humbling themselves before God as they slowly made their way to the altar rail to be as close to God as they could. And so they would sometimes crawl, they would sometimes army crawl, they would sometimes be on their hands and knees as they were slowly making their way to the altar. And they modeled for me what it means to pay homage. I had never seen people paying homage with their whole bodies, not worrying about how their body was going to be in pain or was currently in pain as they made their way to the altar. It was all about just getting to God and paying homage and humbling yourself in the lowest form possible. Not worrying about anything else but just being in God's presence. And I imagine that this is what the Magi might have done. Here they were in the presence of the Son of God, the Messiah. And even though they are Gentiles, God is showing the world God is doing something totally different. That this Messiah is not just the King of the Jews, but the King of the whole world, the Messiah for the whole world. That Magi, Gentiles from the East, would come all this way to pay him homage. And we are called to pay Christ homage in the same way. We are called to put God first. I don't know about you, this has been a really hard week in the news, potential, definitely conflict with Iran right now, potential of bigger conflict with Iran. Oh goodness, losing stuff. Okay, so potential conflict with Iran. Then we've got stuff going on with the United Methodist Church. And then we've got fires in Australia. So lots going on. So lots of prayer needed. All right, friends, gotta figure out what's going on over here. Bye.